Hello, this is Ben Paris, Vice President of Operations for the Seminole County Chamber. You are about to hear Good Morning Seminole, our monthly signature event.
Because we have an amazing panel and a great conversation that we're about to have about Seminole County and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'd like to introduce to you the panel, and as I call the panel members' names, please come on up. Arnold Smalley, owner of Small World Solutions, welcome to the panel. Eddie Fernandez, owner of Eddie Fernandez PA, please come on up. And Jessica Brazier from AdventHealth, please come on up to the stage. Now, this panel, we've got a number of questions for them that we're going to cover, and so the format will be that we are going to ask each of them questions. Some of them are for the whole panel, some of them are for them individually and their expertise, and if we've got time at the end, we may be able to take questions, but I have a feeling it's pretty robust here, so hopefully we get to everything. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for participating today, and I'll open it up with a general question for everyone, which is that our chamber has started a significant push over the next year to help our businesses embrace the changing demographics of our community. So let's start out in broad terms. And for each of you, what does it mean to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Arnell, we'll start with you.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having us in here today. For us, Small World Solutions, what we say when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we usually talk about diversity as being counting heads. And then when we talk about inclusion, is we're trying to make sure every head counts. But then when you add equity into it, you have to take a step back and picture the thing. If you Google equality and equity, you'll see an image of three people that are of different sizes. And mostly everybody has seen this image. And it's three people with different sizes, and they show equality when everybody gets a box and they're looking over a fence to watch a baseball game. But the three different sizes, the first guy with the taller guy is looking over the fence and he's seeing everything. The next guy gets the box and he can stand and now he can see over the fence. But the shorter person, even with the box, still cannot see over the fence. That's equality. Everybody gets the box. And then it shows a picture of equity where the taller man gives his box to the shorter man and now all three people can see over the fence. Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion is, when we talk about equity, we want to remove the barrier. Why not take away the fence? And now everybody can talk. So now anybody with an impaired in a wheelchair can come up to that same border, and if we remove that barrier, now everybody can see. And that's what we call the equity coming into inclusion.
Excellent. Eddie, how about, not COVID, just allergies. Eddie, how about you? What does it mean for you to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
Thanks for the question. First of all, good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and on this important topic. Jason, I'm going to I think that was a great explanation. I wish we could. I've seen that cartoon or picture, and I wish we could almost throw it on the screen because I think it is a very powerful tool to define it. But these are experts in the field, and I think their definition matters most. But I'll tell you what it means to me on a personal level. For me, all of these things, diversity and inclusion, equity, all of these things, to me, our goal should be to, many physicians will probably tell many of us, hey, listen, don't go on a diet, make a lifestyle change, right? And I think as we explore these topics today, I think that's the mode we need to think about these things. This is about a lifestyle change. It's about actually changing culture. It's not necessarily about a particular program. I think our goal, in fact, should be to do away with the necessity for these types of programs, and it rather just be ingrained in our society and in our culture and in our businesses. And I think that's what leads to the best business practice. So as to the definition, I'll leave it to the experts, but I think that's the tone that we should set this morning. This is a lifestyle. It's not a diet that you go on. We're not trying to do this on a short-term basis. This is good for business, and this is also good for our society. And I think that's what it's about, is taking that attitude towards diversity.
Thank you much. Jessica, how about you? What do you think?
First, I so appreciate my colleagues' responses, the imagery that Arnell evoked, and thank you, Eddie, for that personal observation of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. And I'm speaking for healthcare, AdventHealth. What does DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion mean for healthcare? And for us, When we look at diversity, we're thinking about all the things that make us similar and different and how we represent that. So for example, we have been on a journey to represent and reflect the communities we serve in terms of our workforce. And by having a diverse workforce, we believe we solve problems more effectively and we deliver care more effectively. In fact, that's been proven. By inclusion, we mean belonging. So what do I mean by belonging? Belonging is feeling like you are at home, like you are appreciated and valued where you are. And we mean this for not only the people who are delivering care, but also the people receiving care. This might be, if you're receiving care, getting it in the language that you best understand. And for equity, we mean fairness, and Arnold described it perfectly, but how do we ensure that everyone has a fair opportunity to be as healthy as possible? And many times this means removing barriers to what could be keeping them from being healthy. So it could be food insecurity or barriers related to transportation or access to care. And it's looking at all of those things in a way that addresses social determinants of health. And I'll just quickly summarize this. In industry, a popular saying has been, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and by equity, it means you're invited to contribute to the playlist. So that's another illustration that sometimes explains what we mean by DEI.
Jessica, we'll stay with you. That's great. AdventHealth's been at the forefront of diversity and inclusion for years. What do you think is important, and why do you believe businesses of all sizes need to embrace this?
Thank you for the question. And the first thing I'll say is it's the right thing to do. In healthcare, I would say it's fundamental for us because we are called to deliver care to everyone, regardless of age, race, ethnicity, language, sexual orientation, gender identity. We have to show up in a healing way for our community. And then I'll add on to that, as a faith-based healthcare system, we believe that everyone is a child of God, and our mission is to extend the healing ministry of Christ. And to that end, we can only do that when we're living up to our service standards in a way that appreciate and validate diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the last thing I'll add, and I mentioned this earlier, is it's good for business. The research shows, the data shows, the studies from different corporations show that companies that have a commitment to diversity programming, they are more productive, they earn more, they have better hiring quality, better customer satisfaction, better retention and loyalty. And in a time when the war for talent is pretty intense, we all have heard about the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle. At a time when we're really fighting for talent, this is important because it's been observed that Generation Z and millennials, they will actually turn down a job offer from an organization if they don't feel like it's inclusive. So those are things we have to think about as we think about our sustainable organizations.
Eddie, how about you? Anything to add there about why all businesses need to embrace diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of context, because I think Jessica said it right, and particularly, I was going to jump on that last point. So a little bit on me. I run a boutique law firm that focuses on mergers and acquisitions, corporate law, and commercial real estate. You might say to yourself, well, how does that apply with diversity? And what I have found with my own clients, it's not just the right thing to do. Discrimination is not just legally prohibited. What I have seen with my client base and what I've seen in the business world in general is that when you do run a diverse workplace and you run a diverse company that attracts diverse clients, it allows you to enter into fields for sales or for anything else, which is obviously very important to a chamber. It allows you to more easily access markets, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. That you might not ordinarily have access to. And making sure that focus is there drives up sales. It, as was alluded to, it certainly creates a better work environment. And so what's good for business in many ways is good for our society if we look at it from this perspective. They go hand in hand, and I think they're incredibly synergetic.
Excellent. Arnell, how about you?
Well, I guess
Did they say it all? What do we
yeah,
got?
they pretty much said it all. Just to add on to that, I guess piggyback off what they both have just talked about, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a major for every business because what it does is it brings in new perspectives. It brings in new ideas. And if you think about it, the top Fortune 500 companies, what's the number one company that's been in there for the last 25 years is what company? Anyone? Fortune 500 company? In the last 25 years, Apple has been the number one company in the Fortune 500 for the last 20 of the 25 years, 21 of the 25 years. Think about that. They were number 2 for 2 years, and they were number 3 for 2 years. So basically, Apple has been in the top 3 for the last 25 years. One of the things about Apple is when you talk about statistics and diversity, equity, and inclusion, just in the women alone, they decided to be more diversified in their top management. They have 29% women in top management positions. And you think about that, they're the number one company in the Fortune 500. So who doesn't want to follow a company that's that successful? And I mean, the statistics alone prove that, having diversity and equity, it increases it's 2.3 times more profitable to have diversity, equity, and inclusion inside your business.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I want to go back to something. We'll do some individual questions now. Eddie, that you said is that, as a business and commercial real estate attorney, you see a lot of the businesses that are coming to the U.S., and while the Latin influx is obvious, what are some communities that you are seeing change our region, and what is it that you see as migration happening in the next couple of years that our businesses may be able to get ahead of?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think in our marketplace, Central Florida is an incredibly diverse marketplace. I have a lot of South Asian clients, for example. There's a lot of migration here from India, from Pakistan, from other places that sometimes doesn't bubble up to the radar in many ways. It's an incredibly diverse place. Maybe some of the items that Jason was alluding to. One of, as I mentioned, I do a lot of mergers and acquisition work, so I help people buy and sell their businesses. I also help a lot of clients who want to come here and either start a business or purchase one or purchase real estate. One of the things I focus my practice on, about a third of my practice, is actually figuring out where people are going to be coming from to Central Florida and helping them buy businesses and helping folks like you all have exits. And from that perspective, one of the things I look at least on a geopolitical level, is what are the countries that are experiencing any kind of political turmoil or have upcoming elections. So one of the things I do on a very regular basis is I travel to Latin America to give presentations. And in those presentations, what I usually do is I team up with other professionals who are in similar industries. And what we are so blessed in this country to have a stable form of government, to have chambers that we can come to and feel safe at. Many business owners in our hemisphere don't have that luxury. So what I often do is I will actually target those countries. Right now, sort of Peru is very hot right now, Honduras with its recent election. And I travel to these countries and actually assist people to come here and purchase businesses, start businesses. And that adds to the diversity, Jason, because from that perspective, you can almost pinpoint on a map when there is an unstable government in a country. Those are the people who are coming here in the next 12 months. And it's people like you all who are sitting in this room. The business owners are the first to leave. They have the means, but they also have the interest because they know that the government is coming for them. And so from that perspective, that's a large part of my practice, is helping those people come here.
Excellent. Thank you, Eddie. Arnold, your company specializes in having these conversations, and it's difficult with business owners who've had a lifetime of experiences to maybe bring this up. As an expert in this, how do you bring up the subject of race without discounting or insulting folks? How do you get that started?
Well, the first part about it is it comes with cultural competence. And I don't like to use the word cultural competence because competence means that you're competent in knowing that about other races or cultures. what we like to use in our business is cultural humility. And the reason why we use humility is because no one is going to be an expert in everyone's culture. It's almost impossible to be an expert in everyone else's culture. But having that humility allows you to say, hey, I don't know everything about your culture, but I'm willing to learn or just accept that you do things differently. And if you can have that cultural humility, you'll find out that it comes from a position of love, actually. And that's what we need in this country, because right now we're living in a polarized society. And what we want to do is try to bridge that gap, because we have more things in common than we do have our differences.
Jessica, AdventHealth recently appointed a Chief Health Equity Officer to identify and address disparities in the healthcare system. Can you expand on that effort for us and why that was so important?
Absolutely. Mountains and mountains of studies show that disparate outcomes occur for different populations in terms of healthcare, whether it's for people of color, across the board, whether you're talking about an infant to somebody who's elderly. They get lower doses of pain medication. It's been studied and studied again and again, and it's usually due to assumptions about substance abuse or the ability to trust that someone is being accurate about what they are feeling or their level of pain. And we're seeing things like that to different levels of infant mortality rates for Black mothers. We're even seeing disparities that occur across the lines of sex and gender and language. And what we did with the appointment of Dr. Ulrich Simmons, he's a clinician, a physician, he is going to be leading our work to identify and address health disparities across our system. So we're in 9 states. We serve about 6 million patients a year, over 50 hospitals. And here's what's exciting about how we're moving forward with this work. Health disparities have been long studied, and they've been a long-standing issue. What's newly happening at AdventHealth is we're linking this work to executive accountabilities. So in other words, our leaders' performance will be linked to how they identify and make plans to address some of the disparities that we're seeing, meaning we're going to have to collaborate with the community and work on it together. And we're also thinking about this not just in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in terms of safety and risk management and quality improvement. So for example, it's not okay that a Latino or Black mother is 2 times more likely to experience injury while giving childbirth. And because of that, we're going to look at the safety and quality improvement protocols that we can use to address those kinds of issues. So we're excited about the work ahead and think it's really fundamental to delivering our mission holistically.
Excellent, and you're spot on there. The scientific literature is pretty clear about the need to align organizational leadership with those missions in order to make it stick, quite frankly. All right, so let's have a difficult conversation now. Arnell, you mentioned that it really comes from a place of love, and that there really is a lot more alike about us than is different. But there's been a lot of talk lately about negative ideologies in our schools and workplaces, and as people are becoming more diverse and inclusive, what are your thoughts about this discussion, and how do we handle it?
Well, when you talk about having that difficult conversation, it starts out with setting boundaries. And when we do our diversity and inclusion seminar series, which we have been brought by, I can't remember your name. Ben. I talked with Ben and Rebecca. Ben and Rebecca, I spoke with them about coming into doing the diversity and equity and inclusion seminar series for the chamber. And one of the things that we talk about when we put in a series is because a one-stop shop is not going to, it doesn't have the effect that you would want to get into your business. You want everything to start to grow. And basically what we do is we've designed a program where we're going to come in and we're going to do diversity, equity, and inclusion, cultural humility. Then we're going to come back and talk about unconscious bias. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about conflict resolution and basically critical communications. And the last part is going to be about human behavior styles. And these are all the things that we need. It's not just one thing that you're going to focus on. You'll need a combination of several things in order to be progressive and in order to be very effective in the business environment.
Excellent. I love the idea. There isn't a one-stop shop. If there was, somebody probably would have figured it out by now. So you got to really be committed to it on an individual basis.
Right.
Excellent. Eddie, any thoughts on that, negative ideologies that are creeping into some places and how we handle that?
Yeah, I think that from my perspective, what I often see is there's a conflict between those who simply believe that we're all equal and this conversation doesn't even need to happen in the first place, and that equality means not talking about it. And then there are initiatives and programs and conversations and intentional behaviors and conversations about it. And I think I go back to my first point that I made today. Our goal is to live in sort of a post world of these conversations, right? Our goal is to live in a society where these conversations don't need to happen, these programs don't need to exist. I hate to say it, but we put you all out of a job, right? And that's our goal. That's really our goal is to have equity and justice and have all those things. But in the meantime, I think it's important that we recognize the reason to get there. We need to have these conversations and these initiatives and these programs, and that's what it's about.
Thank you. Jessica, anything to add there?
Eddie said it so well. In fact, I am not offended at all that he wants to take my job away, because I say it all the time that I don't want my job to need to exist. I want DEI to become so infiltrated into our consciousness, so integrated into every function of what we do. Almost like, I don't know if any of you speak another language. Does anyone here speak another language? Have you ever, in the process of learning another language, tried to take every word in your original language and translate it one for one to see how it can make sense? When you become fluent in a language, it just clicks. It flows from you. And in other words, we want people to be fluent in diversity, equity, and inclusion moving forward. And I really want to underscore first, Arnell's point about cultural humility. I think that's going to be an important mechanism we use to get there, but also Eddie's point about this tension that we have in our country around, and not just in our country, this is something we see across the globe in terms of whether or not this exists, the need to do this work exists. And what I will say to that is that historically, marginalized individuals and history just shows up in different ways and has different repercussions that we'll have to address, because ignorance does not allow us to solve problems, and we have to be very intentional about it.
Excellent, thank you. We'll work it all the way back down. Eddie, former clerk of the courts in Orange County. Must be hard to be an elected official.
Yeah, that whole thing.
Diversity was at the forefront in your office, and so what lessons did you learn in that position as a government employee that you think are critical for Seminole County?
Yeah, so a fun fact about, at least when I was clerk in Orange, I think at the time I probably had it was about 475 deputy clerks. Of those 475 deputy clerks, I believe the number was like 74% were female. And I say that because it's an incredibly diverse office, at least from a gender perspective. And I will tell you that it was one of those things that had always caught people's attention, and it was also ethnically and racially a very diverse office. And I think one of the things that I learned from the deputy clerks in my tenure as Orange County clerk is that there is absolutely something to be said for people feeling comfortable interacting with somebody that looks like them or has some kind of cultural similarity to them. And I saw that very frequently in the courthouse and in our offices, that there was, it shouldn't matter, but it often did, where I felt that Orange County residents were getting great service, no matter their color, their gender, or their ethnicity. But the reality of it was that I noted that there was a lot of A lot of benefit to that. And also from an idea perspective in the office, having diversity of thought in the office was an amazing thing. I believe very, very much in kind of trickle-up management, right? Learning from those on the front lines, I think, is something all of us as business people, business owners can do, is making sure to take that feedback into account, and having a diverse pool to receive that feedback from was critical.
Excellent. Arnell, you work with businesses and governments. Your company consults with both sides of this. What have you seen as the number one thing businesses should work on today?
Ooh, the number one thing?
Top thing.
All right, I'll put it this way. There's no such thing as a number one thing to work on. And the reason being is because what could be good for what this business may need could be their number one thing, would probably be the number three thing for another business. And I discussed some of the topics that we're going to cover. And in our last seminar series we did in another chamber, we actually went a group discussion, and one of the things that we talked about was what were the takeaways from our seminar. And one person was saying that, hey, this was great for us to learn. I have diversity, but I don't have inclusion. And he never realized that until he took the class. Another person was saying, matter of fact, from AdventHealth, one of the CEOs was in the class, and he had stated the fact that we have patients that don't want to be touched by minority doctors or nurses. And they had to deal with, how do they deal with that? So, like I said, one thing we talk about for one business is not going to be the same for another. So the groundwork, the basis, the foundation is if you can build a foundation of cultural humility, and you can build upon that. You can get into human behavior styles and learn how to speak with each other. Critical communications, because every time we say something is not what it's being interpreted. So there's different aspects of what we're going to look at.
Great, thank you. As we start to wrap up the more formal part of this program this morning, same question to each of you to wrap up, and we'll start with Jessica. What's the one thing every person in this audience should take away from this discussion this morning?
That this work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's a journey. We're moving from awareness to action, and in fact, AdventHealth and many organizations look at this work as a maturity model, that like a muscle that we're building over time, capacity that we're building over time, and we have to work at it, almost like fitness, so that we become more and more effective over time. But the goal, as we move through this journey, through this maturity model, is exactly what Eddie said earlier, that it becomes part of our consciousness, that it becomes integrated in everything we do. Because not only is it the right thing to do, but it helps us more successfully deliver our missions.
Excellent. Eddie, one thing.
Is she allowed to take mine now?
She took mine too.
You want me to come back here so you
Fair
got time
enough.
to think of something else?
From my perspective, this is a chamber of commerce, after all, and I would want all of you to take away that diversity, inclusion is fantastic for business, and I think the way to get there, it's a conjunction, so it's still one thing, Jason.
Got it. Noted.
And I think the way to get there is to do what we just talked about, which is this isn't about an initiative. This isn't about the buzzwords and the definitions and whatever the popular sort of word du jour is. This is about living it, breathing it, and making it part of the culture of your businesses, and that's what makes it great for business.
Excellent. Arnell, one thing, again, second question, one thing. What's the one takeaway?
All right, I have to piggyback off what Jessica has said just previously. This is a lifelong journey, and we're all on that journey. Even when I facilitate these classes, I'm on that journey as well. And the one takeaway is that I would want you to remember, if you just know this and you knew this well, is diversity is counting heads, and inclusion is making sure every head counts. If you look at the word diversity and you take every letter in the word diversity, you have different individuals valuing everyone, regardless of their skin, their sex, skin or their sex, their integrity, or their Well, I made me forget it. Different individuals valuing everyone regardless of their skin or their sex, their ideology, their talents, or their years. And so that is the one thing to take away.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we have a couple of minutes left. Does anybody have any questions for our panel? Yes.
When we talk about all of this,
It's for the
when we talk
podcast,
about a
so
belief
for prosperity.
system, all right, but where do belief systems start? They start at birth, right? And they start with the parent. And that's who instills. Changing belief systems are extremely difficult. And that's a really tough thing. So when you asked Jason, what would be your, I'll back up. My background is I taught parenting at Seminole Community College for 10 years. And so with parents and birth, and I worked really hard on that, is that we have that open mind and that God did make all of us the same. Is that if everybody in the room, that you're the grandparent, you're the mother, you're the father, you share that every day, as you said, talk about it. Talk about it all the time. It's a fitness that we all start, and that's what everybody can do in this room right now, is talk about it with your children, and how that's probably the best thing you can do for society to change.
Penny, is there a question in there?
It's just that the question, too, is that how are you helping with parents? Are you addressing those things?
Got it.
You know?
There we go. So for anyone on the panel who'd like to respond, as part of this openness with business and making sure that folks understand the value of it for our business community, is there any interactions that you have in helping with parenting?
You know what? I'll share something interesting with you. We actually had a conference on health equity recently. It's a conference where we brought our board members, all of our CEOs, to just really dig deep and reflect on what health disparities are, what challenges we're seeing in the community. And it was a 2-day conference, and as part of it, we sent toolkits, including tabletop conversation cards that you could use to have conversations with your children about these topics in kid-friendly ways, just about how identity shows up in their world, how differences show up in their world, how judgment even shows up in their world. And from what we understood from our CEOs and other leaders, it really sparked interesting conversations, even with children between the ages of 5 and 12. So it shows you that even though a lot of these things don't come up in strong ways until we get older, that's at least been the thought, there are assumptions that we are gaining from the time we are born. In fact, I remember my first time understanding that I was Black when I was 5 years old, and a gentleman, I don't know if I should call him gentleman, just really was rude to me as a child and called me the N-word, a grown adult. And I just remember how awful I felt, and I saw myself as so different from that time on. And it was so good to hear from our leaders that having those conversations got them to be closer to their children, but also to understand how these issues show up in their world.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else, anything to add? All right. Time for one more question.
So question.
You're on.
All right. As a country, which country is doing probably a better job or as good a job that we can kind of learn from them on diversity, equity and inclusion?
Excellent. Eddie, any perspective on that?
I would say that my fellow panelists probably do a lot of research in this field, and they might have an idea on it. From my perspective, I focus. Unfortunately, I from my practice and what I mentioned, for example, I'm going to Peru at the end of the month because of the election that recently happened there. Business people are fleeing. I look at, that's what I focus on. It's more on the business climate in other countries as I assist folks who want to purchase real estate or businesses here or start businesses. So from my perspective, it's more a political answer. I don't know if Dave.
And in that regard, you probably are there because the country's distressed, probably not focused on this as much as they are just survival.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, no, it's a genuine point. I think that we as a country, the fact that we are in a place in our country and in our society where we we have these conversations is sort of a signal of how blessed we are to be in the United States. The fact that we are tackling these issues and not the basics of being able to freely operate your business and live in a free society. I think that just goes to prove how blessed we all are.
Excellent. Arnell, Jessica?
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
I wouldn't know which country would be the best at diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, during my presentations, I do show several videos from other countries that are doing it as well. And one of the reasons why we show that is not something that's just here in this chamber. It's not something that's here in Florida. It's something that's nationwide. It's something that's global. And by showing the diversity, equity, and inclusion videos from other countries, it shows that it's not just here, it's everywhere. So I know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is being sought out from Denmark, from Canada, from all these other foreign countries that are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, because I think it's important to have this context that we are so uniquely blessed with rich diversity in this country that is actually not replicated anywhere else in the world. We have a level of diversity here that is so unique. We remember America was a social experiment at first, and because of that, we encounter unique challenges that countries that have more homogeneous populations won't have. That said, there are also other diverse countries around the world, and when you look at some of the statistics on the engagement surveys, even political and values and belief surveys, Canada is one that actually does fairly well, but again, they don't have the same history, the same nuance that the United States has, but that is one, and of course, even though they have a lot of struggles, when you look at some of the progress that South Africa has made, they are often highlighted as a best practice in some of their reconciliation work.
Excellent. Well, thank you to our panel this morning. This has been spectacular. Give them a round of applause. And I think for those of you that are maybe more mental or visual learners, each one gave an example of something to take away this morning that I think is spectacular, whether it was Arnell's pictograph with the equity and inclusion with the fence and the boxes, whether it was Eddie's diet versus a lifestyle, or whether it was Jessica's going to a dance or learning a language. These are all ways to think about how it is that we make this ingrained in part of our businesses for the fabric of Seminole County. So with that, thank you all once again for being here. And I'm going to wrap up. You guys stay right there, and if you want to stick around for questions, that'll be great.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the Seminole County Chamber, please visit seminolebusiness.org or check us out on all social media at the Seminole Chamber.